Crossover episode time on Candlestick Chronicles / Striking Gold. It is a Blue Wire Pod 49ers Super Bowl preview bonanza with our guy Rob Lowder from the Striking Gold podcast right here on the Blue Wire Podcast Network. And really just this whole trio, 3 of the 4 NinersWire.com OGs. And
the
that's
Biderman
what I
blogging
really
tree.
appreciate.
The Biderman blogging tree.
We should. What's Jared doing with his life? We should have invited our guy Jared.
I know we'd have some really skinny cameras, but I mean, it would
That's
be worth
fine.
it.
We go quad box for it.
We're going quad box.
Shout out to Jared. He's either like coaching football or pouring beers at Coop or
just doing good things in the world.
Being
he's
a father.
way better than doing great things in the world.
Whatever he's doing, it's good. It has to be good.
What a fine human. I'm so glad I know him. Just shout out NinersWire.com. All right, so we're going to talk about the Super Bowl. FYI, San Francisco and Kansas City play on Sunday. In case you missed it, I as the week's gone on, and I know Chris, you and I talked about this a little bit last night, but I want to start with Rob because I've gotten a little bit more optimistic about the 49ers chances as the week has gone on. But Rob, where do you land with the 49ers chances in the Super Bowl to knock off Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs?
I was just telling Chris before we recorded, which you never want to do. You never want to talk about what you're going to talk about before you record, but
save it for the air.
Save it for the pod. I got on with KP last night of Niners Nation, and he almost bestowed upon me the first ounce of positivity that I've had about this matchup in the 2 weeks it's been solidified. And it really just stems from how the 49ers played in the playoffs. And yes, they won. And, that you sort of have to start there. But it was, especially against the Lions, it was really jarring to watch that first half. Like, that was one of the worst defensive performances I've ever seen, like, ever. And it's 3rd and 12, and they're running the ball and they're getting it. It's stuff like stuff I don't even know if I'd ever seen before. And so that really got me to the point. And you're like, all right, last game-winning drive against the Packers, they got it done. Historically good second half against the Lions, got it done. Do the Chiefs and the way they're built give the 49ers the opportunity to do something like that? And it doesn't seem that way. But one of the things that KP talked about is like everything the 49ers want to do and do well should work against the Chiefs. They're one of the worst run defenses in the NFL. The last time they played a team that's somewhat built like the 49ers, which was the Packers, they lost, and they lost fairly convincingly. It wasn't particularly close. So I think I'm in the same boat in the fact that, especially after talking to KP, I think the 49ers, I'm probably wasn't giving the 49ers their due in terms of maybe focusing more on the 2 playoff games than I should have and less on what they built, the reputation they built throughout the season. I guess that's the best way to put it. So I think I'm in the same boat as you in the fact that my confidence in the team is steadily growing.
I think Super Bowl week has a way of kind of putting everybody off the scent, right? There's such a high level of groupthink and reactions to, the latest thing, the latest development, which obviously was Kansas City going to Baltimore, beating the Ravens, the Niners looking terrible for a half, and then coming back to beat the Lions. And we sort of forget sometimes the bigger picture, right? And how often do we see in Super Bowls that, the consensus favorite going into the game, and I know the Niners are the betting favorite, but it doesn't feel like they are the consensus favorite in terms of the way people are talking about this game. It feels like everyone's on Kansas City. Yeah. But how often do we see the consensus favorite just not win the game, right? The Super Bowl is tricky like that. And I do think, there are going to be a lot of human nature factors at play, right? Like the Chiefs are trying to repeat as champions, which we haven't seen since, basically for 20 years when the Patriots did it twice. And the Chiefs obviously won last year. This is their 4th Super Bowl in 5 years. The Niners are a much more desperate team, at least you would think, right? And the Niners are a team where you don't exactly know how long this window is going to stay open, because you don't know if they're going to be able to retain a lot of the talent they have on this roster long term, because Brock Purdy is going to have to get paid at some point starting after
Maybe.
next season.
We'll see after
And
Sunday.
But this is just a team that's dealt with so much heartbreak, right? Like the Niners went to the Super Bowl in 2019, had a 10-point lead in the fourth quarter, lost it. They had a lead in the NFC Championship game 2 years later against the Rams and lost it. They went to the NFC Championship game in Philadelphia, thought they were going to win that game, and then Brock Purdy goes out in the first quarter with a torn elbow ligament. They lose that game, right? Like this is a team that has dealt with defeat so much more often, like basically every year that they've contended than the Chiefs have. And the Chiefs they still feel like they're right in the middle of their dynasty. But I think one of the reasons why it's so hard to repeat is just the human nature element of, man, we were here last year and we don't have the same level of desperation that our opponent has. And I think there's going to be an element to that game. I also think, to Rob's point, there are a lot of matchup things that you can point to. And you could point to, I mentioned it earlier in the week, but the idea of recency bias and small sample sizes versus bigger sample sizes. And I had mentioned, the sample sizes of the playoffs and, what we saw from the 49ers against the Packers and Lions were basically lackluster efforts in comparison. We also have a small sample of the Chiefs being a better team in the playoffs than they were in the regular season. And so it's sort of conflicting. We have conflicting evidence based on what we've seen in the regular season and in the playoffs for both teams. Right. And so I just, maybe I'm, coming at this from a 49ers observer, but that like the criticism of the Niners, at least that we had, was, they can't win games in which they have to come back from. Like they either blow teams out or lose close games, right? Well, when they win some close games, now all of a sudden we feel worse about them,
right?
Like I think maybe this team is so talented, and the foundation's been there for so long, and they're so battle tested. In addition to all the talent that they have, like top to bottom, the Niners have a better roster than the Chiefs. I don't think anyone would argue that. Patrick Mahomes obviously gives the Chiefs a leg up at quarterback, but I think otherwise, you go just position by position, and most of them, the vast majority of them, you would say the Niners have more talent, which I think is ultimately going to be the deciding factor. And to me, like, I don't think this is going to be as lopsided as the Bucks Chiefs Super Bowl, but you remember going into that game, everybody's on the Chiefs, right? Chiefs are trying to
not
repeat.
me.
Well, yeah,
Sorry,
I
go
wasn't
on.
either. But like
I know
I
what you're
wasn't either.
saying.
But it
Being funny. Go ahead.
but it just felt like everyone, like the Chiefs are, they won it last year. There's no reason to believe they won't win it this year, et cetera, et cetera. And the Bucks kind of handed them their lunch, and you realize, like, oh yeah, that was a pretty flawed Chiefs team.
Especially without
this
their two
Chiefs team
starting
has-
offensive tackles.
Yes, and that was obviously the biggest issue. But I think the flaw in the Chiefs this year is at receiver. Like they don't, they have Travis Kelce, but like really what else? And then you look on the other side, the 49ers have all of their guys in their prime. Brandon Ayuk, one of the best receivers in the league. George Kittle, the best tight end in the league against man coverage. Christian McCaffrey, probably going to win Offensive Player of the Year. Maybe when people listen to this on Friday, he will have been named Offensive Player of the Year Thursday night at NFL Honors, right? Like, I just think, and the fact that, to Rob's point, the Chiefs defense wasn't that great against the run, I think that's just a really tough formula to try to beat the 49ers. If the Niners can run the ball on you, they just don't really lose, because it sets up everything else they like to do. So that's kind of where I'm leaning. Like, I fully understand the idea that you never bet against Patrick Mahomes. But at some point, like, is his record going to be like perfect against the spread forever? Right? Like, doesn't just the law of averages say, like, no, he might be in line to lose one of these games eventually. So I understand.
10-2 as a dog all time. 10-2 straight up as an underdog, I think he is.
I had it pulled up.
That's crazy.
Let me see if I can go find it. In 12 career games as an underdog, he's 10-1-1 against the spread and 9-3 straight up. So I don't know, like if you believe in the idea that like these numbers can normalize a little bit, which I tend to, and again, maybe this is just like Niners optimism on my part. I think
Sure.
that the Niners are probably not getting talked about in the way they should. And maybe because, in my opinion, I think people are reading too much into the fact that like, yeah, they had a bad half against the Lions, but like they
Mhm.
still won the game. And I
don't think.
don't view them drastically differently because of that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people that saw the NFC Championship game, and realistically, that was probably the first full 49ers game a lot of people had watched this year. And frankly, I'm guessing a large swath of the country doesn't think the 49ers should even be in the Super Bowl. They're looking at the ball that bounced off Kendall Vildor's face mask. They're looking at a drop on 4th and 3. They're looking at Dan Campbell not taking the points on the other 4th and 3 that would have tied the game. They're looking at a fumble. And I think that's where a lot of the kind of dismissal of the 49ers is coming in. And so much of the analysis, and frankly, I'm guilty of this, is like, well, the Chiefs just have Patrick Mahomes. And that ultimately is the deciding factor in every Chiefs thing over the last
Which
6,
isn't
7
wrong.
years.
It's
No, not at all.
It's
It's
not
the only
wrong.
reason, dude. If Patrick Mahomes is 25% worse, the 49ers would be favored by fucking 50. Like but it's
Yeah.
Patrick Mahomes. And I think that's where a lot of people anchor, and I think that makes sense. But Chris, to your point, the Chiefs roster, top to bottom, you have Travis Kelce, who had 93 catches this year. Then it's Rashee Rice, and this is the thing: their number one wide receiver is a rookie in a Super Bowl. Like that's a tough thing to lean on. Then you have Isaiah Pacheco, is third on the team in receptions with 44, and then Noah Gray, the backup tight end, is fourth on the team in catches. I as good as Patrick Mahomes is, I wonder how effective that group is at making the type of play that Tyreek Hill made in Super Bowl 54. Where, okay, Patrick Mahomes might make the game-changing scramble and the game-changing throw, but is Justin Watson instilling the kind of fear that Tyreek Hill did? Is Marquez Valdes-Scantling? And I think that that's where a lot of the analysis gets missed, is because to this point, it hasn't really mattered. The Chiefs have figured out how to win games over the last month, but they were bad. Their offense was really, really bad for a lot of the year. So I think you're right. I think so much of what happens is the playoffs get so condensed, and that's where season-long analysis of teams gets whittled down to, okay, what did they do last time I saw them? And I'm guilty of this too. And that's why I think more I think about it, the more I've gained some optimism that the 49ers can overcome number 15.
And if we're judging, the conference championship games critically, like you could make a pretty strong case that the Chiefs are pretty fortunate to come out of Baltimore with a win, right? Like the Ravens just completely abandoned the run in the second half. They have 2 turnovers basically in the end zone, or one at the goal line, another interception in the end zone, in a game that Baltimore lost by 7.
Mm-hmm.
And the Chiefs didn't score a point in the entire second half.
Right, exactly. So I think we can get caught up in what happened recently and lose the bigger picture. And look, maybe the 49ers lose. Like there's obviously there's a very reasonable chance that the Chiefs win and repeat. I just don't look at this Chiefs team, the entire breadth of the season, as impressive as their playoff run has been, as a team that like, oh yeah, this is probably a team that's going to win back-to-back Super Bowls. Like, and I know that's not great analysis, but it's just really, really hard to repeat. And I don't see this Chiefs team like, and if they do it, obviously they earn to be talked about that way. But it just doesn't seem like a team that transcends greatness to be like the first team in 20 years that's going to win back-to-back Super Bowls, particularly against this 49ers team, which, DVOA and subjectively, and the way we talk about the roster, like this is the best 49ers team we've seen since 1994, right? Just talent wise,
right?
Like that would be a pretty big achievement for this Chiefs team, given what we saw from them during the regular season.
I agree.
And just a question for you guys. When was the last time the 49ers played at just an elite, destroying a team level? Was the Eagles the last game?
Yeah, probably.
I think that's part of the reason that I have probably not given him quite as many flowers that they deserved. Is the last time that they truly dismantled a team was, I mean, they beat the Cardinals pretty bad. I think they were in the 40s in that one, but how much credit do you give for that? But it's like, when was the last time you saw the 49ers just completely dismantle a team? And I think that's what kind of everybody expected to see against the Packers, the first seed against the 7th seed. And then it ended up coming down to the very last drive. And, Aaron Jones, given a lot of it was from one play, but you don't just get to discount that, ran wild on him. Right. Then the Lions ran wild on him. And, and I think that to your point, Kyle, I think there is a little bit of, what's the word I'm looking for here? You do have to acknowledge the stuff that the Lions did to help the 49ers win that game. They had some decisions they could have made that would have really made that game different from the 49ers. And that final drive would have been to tie the game rather than to take the lead, or that Lions touchdown that Lions touchdown in the end would have tied the game rather than put it within 3, and stuff like that. So, I mean, I still think the 49ers are the team that has the biggest chance of doing that, though. If you were to look at these two teams and say, which team do you think has the better chance to just blow this game up? You would think it would be the 49ers, just based on what they want to do. The Chiefs are one of the worst rush defenses in the NFL. And I was telling KP if I was Kyle Shanahan going into this game, my entire focus would be on, we are going to run the ball better and more than we ever have all season. And we're not going to. And one thing that gives me a little bit of confidence that the 49ers might do that was, you go and look at the third quarter against the Lions, where they were down by 17 points, and they still ran the ball 9 times and threw it 11 times. And then they maintained the balance. Kyle Shanahan didn't panic. He kept doing what I guess when you have Christian McCaffrey, it gives you that, that benefit. But I think the 49ers, the thing that's kind of grown on me is they have the biggest key, I guess you could say, the biggest opportunity to take advantage of any mismatch in the game. And that's just happens to revolve around a guy that, like Chris said, might win Offensive Player of the Year. He's an MVP candidate, so it's just to be a candidate as a running back is insane. So, maybe that's where things should start and end, is the fact that the 49ers, Chiefs have the Chiefs have Patrick Mahomes, but the 49ers have Christian McCaffrey, and he might be in a position to influence that game more than Patrick Mahomes does.
I want to stick on the quarterbacks.
Okay, go ahead.
I want to stick on the quarterbacks.
No, I was just going to say,
this is funny. You talk, I'm not talking.
And with Christian McCaffrey being a threat, when the thing that I think makes the 49ers so dangerous is they can use Christian McCaffrey's gravity, for lack of a better term, as a decoy. He can create,
I think that was a great
issues.
Term. Not for lack of a better term. That was a great term.
It's just kind of a cliche, right?
I thought it was great.
Thank you. Appreciate that. But Christian McCaffrey lining up one way can pull multiple defenders to that side. And then all of a sudden you have Deebo Samuel going. The one thing, this 49ers offense is a lot more prepared for, I think, a Steve Spagnuolo blitz heavy defense because of how the offense has evolved. The fact you have Christian McCaffrey, the fact you have Deebo Samuel, you have George Kittle, you have all these guys that provide so many answers to what to questions the defense poses, that you had sort of versions of that in the previous Super Bowl, but you also had Jimmy Garoppolo pulling the trigger, and it just feels drastically different now. So by having Christian McCaffrey, not only is he better than any offensive player the 49ers had in 2019, but they also have a supporting cast that's a lot better than what they had in 2019.
Yeah. I want to stick on the quarterbacks here for 1 second. There's a really good question in the chat from my guy Joe, but I think there's going to be a really interesting, not necessarily referendum, but big offseason discussion about team building based on this game. Because you have the Chiefs, who have the ultimate, built the team around the quarterback and then figured out how to piece together a Super Bowl contender around him, where they let Tyreek Hill walk. They had to replace their left tackle. The Chris Jones thing was touch and go, and he ended up missing what he missed, a game, 2 games. He ended up just the one, I think, but he missed time this year because of his contract. They've pieced together a secondary, and now they have a very good defense and a dominant quarterback who's making an offense work. And then you have the exact opposite on the other side with the 49ers. They have a really good defense, obviously, but I think the perception is the offensive weapons make the quarterback work instead of vice versa. And I'm really, really interested to see just kind of what the big picture discussion is coming out of Sunday on that front. That ties in perfectly to Joe's question. And Rob, I want your thoughts here. If Mahomes and Purdy both have A+ performances in the Super Bowl, which team is winning?
I think the 49ers, because I think an A+ performance from Purdy really only revolves around not turning the ball over. And if Purdy doesn't turn the ball over, and kind of the Chiefs are also one of the worst teams in the NFL against play action. I can bet the 49ers going to want to run the ball like crazy. So if Brock Purdy doesn't turn the ball over and just kind of does what he's been doing all season, I'm not going to use any of those phrases that have been talked about all week and have been on some dude's shirt and all that stuff. If he just takes care of the ball and doesn't do, we started to see in the playoffs and maybe towards the end of the season, or at least in their bigger games, he has a tendency to, it's just the gunslinger thing, which I think is perfectly fine. I think Kyle Shanahan is perfectly cool with living with a couple of those interceptions from here and there, because he knows that that's just the byproduct of the way Purdy plays the position. And I think he's fine with that. But I think an A+ game from Purdy is not turning the ball over and taking what the defense gives him. You still, obviously, the question says you have to consider what an A+ performance looks like from Mahomes. I just think that's more of a, okay, I'm going to take this game and put it on my shoulders and make some crazy plays to keep us in it. Whereas I think an A+ game from Purdy is not turning the ball over and letting the offense kind of just steamroll its way to what you need it to do. So I guess if that makes sense, that would be my answer.
An A+ game from Mahomes could also include like 4 drops from his receivers.
Right. He's only one.
Good point.
One part of the equation.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to say. I if both quarterbacks are on their A game, I would give the 49ers the edge just because of the playmakers that they have.
Yeah.
Right. Like you can, and Kyle Shanahan's ability to get those guys open in space. So that's where my answer would lie. I do wonder if what we saw from Brock Purdy in the second half of the Lions game, particularly the way he used his legs, unlocks a different level from him. Right. Because when we've seen him play poorly, he kind of did the thing that like Jimmy Garoppolo would do, hold on to the ball a little bit too long and try to force a bad pass.
Yeah, second guessing his reads.
And and against the Lions, instead of holding on to the ball and really hoping something will spring open downfield while the pocket collapses around him, he's inclined to just bolt and just go get the first down with his legs and go. Like, he's not a slow quarterback, right? Like he's not Lamar Jackson, obviously.
Well,
no one would confuse him for Lamar Jackson.
I was wondering where that was going.
but like I think he's a guy who's proven that he can run away from linebackers, even if defenses have spies on him. So I just think I wonder if that's going to be an element of Purdy's game, that instead of, because Kyle Shanahan, it always feels like he's coached quarterbacks like, he just really doesn't want guys to become too reliant on their legs. And Brock Purdy has been that guy who's been super reluctant oftentimes to rely on his legs to make plays. But then when it came down to the season being on the line against Detroit, he was willing to do so. And he wasn't really like abandoning the pass concept early. It was just, I have an opportunity to run here and I'm going to take it. And I wonder if that's the dynamic of the 49ers offense that translates to the Super Bowl, in the sense that, like, okay, Brock Purdy can play within structure, and we've seen him make a fair amount of plays outside of structure. But is there going to be this new dynamic to where, and it's what Patrick Mahomes does, frankly. Like, how often do we see Patrick Mahomes make back-breaking plays, just like scrambling for a third down conversion on 3rd and 12? Feels like it happens once or twice a game, right? Like Purdy is athletic enough to do the same thing, and I wonder if he tapped into that against the Lions, and it unlocks his game to a different level on Sunday.
Just to support your point, I think the Chiefs play a majority of man coverage, and like we've seen so many times in the past, when a defense is playing man and a quarterback decides to run, that's when they're running for these huge expanses of space because entire defenses are turned and looking at who they're covering. And so it wouldn't surprise me at all if that was just a huge part of the, I don't know about designed run game. What was it, a couple games ago? Kyle Shanahan tried to do a designed run with Purdy, and it was the saddest play. But it wouldn't surprise me at all if that was a huge part of this game.
Was it the Packers game? Oh yeah, because that was the same game they did the Juwan Jennings.
I think that was the first drive of the second half.
Oh boy,
yeah,
that was tough.
It was the first. I think it was. Yeah, there were a couple weird plays to start drives.
Did you hear Kyle Shanahan's explanation of how Juwan Jennings ended up back there, and like they just called the play forgetting that Deebo Samuel wasn't there, and all of a sudden Juwan Jennings is standing back there.
Well, there was they called the play and there was an adjustment on the play, but the adjustment didn't get heard in the play call, I think, or something. And it was, anyway, Kyle Shanahan described it in the post-game press conferences as like doing the I'm Ron Burgundy thing and like reading the question mark off the teleprompter.
Yeah. So, Kyle, what's your answer with the A plus game question?
I've been leaning on it's Mahomes, and the Chiefs are going to win because they have Patrick Mahomes thing. So it's hard for me to say, yeah, if he lights it up and has an A+ Patrick Mahomes just dominate everything, there's nothing you can do about it game. I don't know how the 49ers win it. But on the other hand, if Brock Purdy is also having an A+ game, that means the 49ers are probably running it super effectively. It means an A+ Purdy game means he's taking and hitting shots down the field. And in that instance, I think that I like the 49ers defense to come up with some kind of stop more than I like the Chiefs to do so, even though the Chiefs have been a better defense all year. It's like, are you taking Nick Bosa or George Karlaftis to come up with a stop? Are you taking Fred Warner or Drew Tranquil to come up with a stop? I think I probably lean Purdy, and Chris brings up a good point. But Mahomes played really well in that game against the Bucs, where he's running for his life, and they scored 9 points. So I guess I'll lean Purdy, just because I think that would accentuate the difference in the rosters more.
Yeah, maybe to your point, and this might not be a good example, but there was that play against the Ravens where Mahomes like scrambled to the left and then threw that weird pass to Kelsey, and he dove and caught it. And, that was Mahomes making like an A+ play that kept that drive going. Whereas we've seen it time and time again, an A+ play for Brock Purdy is hitting Brandon Ayuk in stride, and then he takes that for 40 to 50 more yards and then scores. Right. Deebo Samuel, make your pick. So maybe that's where I kind of draw the line is or the difference is an A+ game in Kyle Shanahan's offense is a lot different than maybe what the Chiefs have shown throughout the season is their A+ type of play. I guess that's the best way to say it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just think, I don't know. I think we rely heavily on, or at least like the narrative, I think relies heavily on what happened in 2019. And I think these are two very different teams.
Can
maybe,
maybe
the Niners, maybe the Niners can't stop the run and maybe Patrick Mahomes lights them up and they lose. And like, that's fine. But I just think like, again, I don't want to make the same point, but I feel like we're just relying heavily on the recency bias when we see so often in the NFL, like particularly with the Niners, sometimes after dog shit performances, they come out and light it up the next week.
Yeah. They've also, give me 1 second here. I'm trying to do two things at once. The Niners have also been really good after like bye weeks or mini bye weeks this year. They came off their first mini bye was after week 3 when they had the Giants on Thursday. They came out and they beat the Cardinals 35-16. And that was Arizona. That was Josh Dobbs. I get it. But then you go to the actual bye week. They come out and beat Jacksonville 34-3. And Jacksonville was rolling and also coming off their bye that time. That was in Jacksonville. You get the Eagles game after the extra rest with the Thursday night game against Seattle. They smoked the Eagles. And then they had their playoff bye where they didn't play great against the Packers, but they came back and won that one. But I think that's probably something of a factor here. But Chris, you brought up 2019, and the more instructive game for me is last year's Chiefs-Niners game at Levi Stadium, which has somehow gotten lost in the wash here. It's everybody's going, well, I was listening to Mad Dog Russo today on this podcast called The Press Box. It's really good. It's Brian Curtis. Highly recommend everybody listen. But he's going, I've seen this game before. It was I saw it in 2019. Like, no, this is not the same game. Like very, very different. But I go back to, and I think that's kind of what I'm leaning on. It has nothing to do with 2019. I keep going back to that game at Levi Stadium where Patrick Mahomes threw for 423 yards and 3 touchdowns. Isaiah Pacheco, 8 carries for 43 yards. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, 6 for 32 and a touchdown. Mecole Hardman, 2 for 28 and 2 touchdowns. Jerick McKinnon, 2 for 12. Like, the Niners just didn't have any answers for Andy Reid. And Nick Bosa said, it was like the worst game Nick Bosa's ever played. And Bosa after the game was like, they just schemed us up. Like, we just were not ready for what they threw at us. And now you're getting Andy Reid with a bye week to scheme something else up. Like, that's what I keep going back to when I have concerns about the 49ers defense against this Chiefs offense. It has way more to do with that than a 3rd and 15 bomb to Tyreek Hill 4 years ago.
Yeah.
That's
fair.
fair.
Anyways,
Especially when you go back and you look at the Super Bowl matchup, and the 49ers leading receiver was Kendrick Bourne with 2 catches for 42 yards. And
yeah, but that second catch is
like
a big one, Rob.
it was just so, like, I was looking through that. I was like, man, this, to your point, I was like, because I was talking about this game on the pod, and I was looking at it, I'm like, man, this is nothing like the 49ers are now. It's just weird. So yeah, maybe if you're looking for a little bit darker of a story, you can go to that game last year. And it was, it didn't the 49ers score late and make it look even better than it did? You know, it it more of a blowout than it even looked? It's 20 win, but.
Well, it was in the fourth quarter, it was 23-28.
Yeah,
That's right. It's the opposite of what I think it is.
When George Kittle caught a pass, and then Mecole Hardman scored, and then Jimmy Garoppolo took a sack in the end zone. And then there was
when he ran out the back of the end zone?
No, that was a different save.
Okay.
And then Juju Smith-Schuster caught a 45-yard touchdown with 6 minutes left to make it 44-23. So it was close, but it did feel like the Chiefs were just kind of kicking the Niners' ass that week. But the Niners were coming off. I mean, I don't know how deep into the weeds we want to get on it, and I'm not trying to make excuses for them, but it was one of those. They had back-to-back games on the East Coast, and they stayed at what's it called? What's the resort in West Virginia? The Greenbrier. They stayed there between the game against Carolina and Atlanta. They ended up losing that Atlanta game. Nick Bosa didn't play in that one because he had, I think it was a sprained knee or a sprained ankle. And you remember the Falcons ran all over him. And they just like couldn't set the edge in that game without Nick Bosa and Marcus Mariota in there. So I don't know. Like I get your point for sure, but I just like in the regular season, particularly like that early, like that was October.
Yeah.
I mean, I just, it's hard for me to compare an October regular season game to a Super Bowl, I guess would be my take.
No, and that's totally fair. And not to mention, since we're nitpicking a game from almost a year and a half ago, the 49ers in a 14-13 game. No, I'm deep in the weeds now. With a minute and a half left in the first half, Jimmy Garoppolo on 3rd and 3 from the 5 just threw a duck to nobody, and it got intercepted in the end zone. And that's the kind of play I don't think you see Brock Purdy making at the opposing team's 5-yard line in a 1-point game. And that just kind of swung the game because the Niners didn't take the lead and couldn't lap the Chiefs, etc.
But whether
Oh no, they
whether
didn't get
we're
the ball in the
talking
second half.
about
Sorry.
whether we're talking about 2019 or 2022, the point here also is that Brock Purdy is a substantial upgrade over Jimmy, just overall.
Like way better.
I don't know. Brock Purdy played in that game against the Chiefs, and he threw an interception.
That was his
Damn
NFL
it.
debut.
Nope, that's wrong actually. He had to kneel down against the Panthers in week 5.
Okay.
Negative
you.
rushing yards.
I'm
Good knowledge.
This is
Good knowledge.
funny.
First pass he threw was in that
There you go.
Chiefs game. But
How to bed.
I don't know.
Sorry.
Like, so is there, no, you're fine. Is there any world? I mean, how do we, okay, so I think we should talk about Kyle Shanahan and legacies, because part of me is like, man, if he loses again, and we've talked about this too, but like, if he loses again, the chatter about him not being able to come through in the biggest moments, et cetera, is going to be something that happens. If he wins, it obviously changes his legacy substantially. But I'm reminded that like Kyle Shanahan's 44 years old, and he's probably going to coach in the league for 10 or 15 more years at least.
Mm-hmm.
So like, would it be gutting for Kyle Shanahan's career and the way we view him if he does not win the Super Bowl? Or is this just like, hey, he's 44, he's going to have a lot of other opportunities, hypothetically?
I really struggle with that whole can't win a big game. Can't do, like, anybody that ever says fire Kyle Shanahan, like, I mean, and I always say this, and everybody always says this, but if they did like an NFL coaching draft, wouldn't Kyle Shanahan go like top 3 or top 5? Like the idea that he's somehow lacking in really any department just blows my mind. Like, yes, somebody has to lose the Super Bowl, and you're playing the best team in the NFL on the other side of the ball, you know, along with, like, what is that supposed to say? And if you want an example of how shit can change, just look at the guy on the other sideline. Like, Andy Reid spent forever as the guy that couldn't win the big one. And then, you know, he finally got a quarterback, not finally got a quarterback. Obviously he had some pretty good ones, but Patrick Mahomes is a whole different ball game. And now he's about, you know, trying to win his third. Is this his third?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
It would be his third.
So, I mean, the big thing that to me, to your point and sort of adding to it, is, can the team in its current makeup handle losing another game like this? I don't think it shouldn't damage Kyle Shanahan's reputation. We've seen him win big games. NFC Championship is still a big game. Like, excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
But it's, you know, this, like you said, this team has come so close so many times. And how many times can you win coming that close and still keep your head in the clouds? You know, they're human beings, and they seem to be one of the most professional and well-organized locker rooms I've ever seen with the 49ers. But at the same time, like, how many of big games can you lose and still come to work next season ready to win it all again? You know, like, I think at some point you have to wonder if that starts to chip away at their resolve. But as far as Kyle Shanahan goes, I mean, if he's going to coach another 10 to 15 years, there's a good chance that he's the 49ers coach for another 10 to 15 years. He's just that good.
Yeah. I think the whole legacy thing, Andy Reid is the example, like Rob brought up. I mean, Andy Reid was a laughingstock and then got Patrick Mahomes, and now he's considered one of the greatest coaches of all time. Like, it comes down to that. Kyle Shanahan did not have Jaquiski Tartt drop that interception. Kyle Shanahan did not have Brock Purdy's elbow explode. No matter how much anybody wants to make that about Kyle Shanahan's play call, that's not that they called a play action pass. That's how the game works. So I don't blame him for that. I certainly think that the 28-3 Falcons collapse getting put on him is nuts and totally insane. And then you get to that Super Bowl, and that's where I think I'm interested to see how he responds in this one, because what happened in that Super Bowl was they went away from the run because the Chiefs were putting Terrell Suggs on the field, and he was like a run-stopping defensive end at that point. And the Niners were getting him matched up one-on-one with George Kittle, and Jimmy Garoppolo couldn't make a play. And his passes were getting batted down by Chris Jones. And I think that, I don't know if that's on him as a coach necessarily. Like, yeah, no, a defensive player made a play. Like, sometimes that just happens. So I think in the national conversation, I think if the 49ers lose this game, to answer your question, Chris, I think this will very much be one of those like referendums on Kyle Shanahan. Can't win the big one. He's Andy Reid. He's Mike McCarthy. He's whatever. But, I mean, that can go away if they come back next year and win one, or in 2 years and win one. And I certainly don't think he's going anywhere for San Francisco. Like, Jed York's getting home playoff games, and he has stability, and he has a cohesive front office and head coach that's building winning rosters and all that jazz. Like, I think Kyle Shanahan's job security is fine, even if the national conversation on him changes.
He's 8-3 in the playoffs.
That's pretty good.
Andy Reid didn't win a Super Bowl until his 21st season as a head coach, and he didn't win a Super Bowl until his 7th season with the Kansas City Chiefs.
How many total season has Andy Reid been a head coach?
Since 99.
Since 99, yeah.
That
so he's on 25 years as a head coach. So Kyle Shanahan could certainly be a head coach. Yeah, Kyle Shanahan could certainly be somebody who coaches in the league for that long. I think if he chooses to. He is only 44. This is Kyle Shanahan's 7th season with the Niners. So, it took Andy Reid 7 seasons with the Chiefs before he won one. So yeah, like it's going to be the hyperbole machine is going to be in on Kyle Shanahan if he doesn't get it done. And I'm always of the mind of like, all right, if you want this guy fired, like give me a replacement who's going to be as good. Right. And to Rob's point, there's probably 25 other teams who would love to upgrade their head coaching situation with Kyle Shanahan.
Yeah.
So, I think like, what he's done for the league in terms of just having basically, it feels like half the league runs a version of his offense, or if not a directly connected version of his offense through his coaching tree. So I don't know if we're like getting out ahead of that conversation, but I just think like if he loses, yeah, it'll be a mark on his record and it will hurt. It'll hurt him personally, like to himself. It'll hurt him more than anybody else. Like the criticism that he will get will be less of the pain that he feels inside for losing. Like I do know that like he's a maniac when it comes to trying to win like this. So,
he's also going against Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, which is sort of a cop-out, but it's the reality that if they lose, you're talking about a guy who's working his way onto the quarterback Mount Rushmore. Like, I mean, it still sucks because you're still losing the Super Bowl, but it's not the same as not all losses are created equal.
I agree.
Yeah. We'll see. I mean, it depends. I've been talking about how I don't think the Chiefs are as good as they've looked the last couple of weeks, based on how we've seen throughout the whole season. So I don't know if I can say like, Patrick
Mahomes isn't good though.
Right. Well, but also like, they lost to the GOAT. It's fine. It would be talking. I'd be talking about out of both sides of my mouth if I said that.
I don't know. If the 49ers lose, I can't wait to jump on this podcast and be like, but now they pick 31st instead of 32nd. Chestnut checkers. They're playing the long game by catching the L.
Right.
One of my other concerns here, I'm just negative Nancy here, guys. I'm sorry. One of my other concerns here, I have some wrinkles I want to run by you guys. Chris, you and I have talked about a couple of these, but Rob, I want to loop you in on some things the Niners might be able to do differently, or little things they can change. But before we get to that, one of my big concerns here, forget 2019, forget 2022. The 49ers struggles with tackling at points this year has just killed them. The Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes, threw 63% of his passes behind or within 9 yards of the line of scrimmage. It is a lot of short throws. And I'm expecting a lot of Isaiah Pacheco, who is very hard to tackle. and a lot of, I know Mecole Hardman, he fumbled twice in the AFC title game. He had a big fumble in that game, so maybe it's not Mecole Hardman, but they just have, between Kelsey and Rice and Pacheco, and then you get the rando Marquez Valdez-Scantling or Justin Watson catch. I could see a scenario where Patrick Mahomes has a 27 of 35 type of game for 340 yards because the Chiefs broke a bunch of tackles and had a bunch of yak, and Mahomes ADOT was 5.6, but they still tore it up through the air. Like, that's the other thing that I keep coming back to, is how much the Chiefs have relied on that and how much the 49ers. And there have been times too, not just other side of this coin. I mean, it's Fred Warner, it's Dre Greenlaw, Tayshaun Gibson is a good tackler. I think Diamador Lenore's done a nice job. Mm-hmm. They have bodies capable, and they've done it before this year of being a sound tackling team. But when you look at strength on strength or strength on weakness or whatever, if the 49ers have a game where they're missing 9, 10, 11 tackles, that could be a very big problem.
Well, to kind of pile on, it's not only were they, and this is one of the reasons I came into this whole conversation, and yesterday before I potted with KP, like a little down on the 49ers, was like, how do you have a conversation about effort in the NFC Championship game? Like, how much effort they were putting in on any given play a conversation in the game to go to the Super Bowl? Like, so you combine that with tackle, and maybe that's exactly what the 49ers needed. They got lucky in the fact that they were able to put that on tape and be called out on that by nationally, I guess you could say, and it not result in a loss. They were able to win that game despite their bad tackling and despite their bad effort. So maybe that was a wake-up call they needed right before they were going to face an offense that would like to beat them the exact same way. But you're right, though. Like, what seems more predictable, the fact that they've already done it or the fact that you're just hoping that they fixed it? And to me, what they do and what they've put on tape seems like what you can rely on happening again. So if you're just if you're just hoping the 49ers tackling woes are fixed, and you're just hoping that that all of the players are going to rally to the ball like my middle school football team is taught to, all of a sudden, then maybe, that seems a little bit more, I don't know, whatever the word would be. Like, the odds are, you are what the tape shows you are, and the odds are good. The 49ers are going to do the exact same thing to some extent that they did against the Lions.
Pro Football Focus, like, again, it's not gospel.
Not infallible.
They had the Niners,
for sure.
Not infallible. They had the Niners as the sixth best tackling team throughout the regular season. And overall, just like defensively, if the Niners came out defensively and laid an egg and were as bad as they were in the first half of the Lions game, it would be an all-time disappointment. It would probably be one of the biggest disappointments in like franchise history, frankly. Right? Like, given the talent that they have, given that, they add Chase Young, who was viewed to be a really strong addition to an already good pass rush, given that they spent a bunch of money on Javon Hargrave in the offseason. Obviously made Nick Bosa the highest paid defensive player in NFL history in the offseason. If they were to come out and play really poorly against the Chiefs in the Super Bowl, it would be an all-time disappointment, because the 49ers have been built, like, the defense has been their backbone throughout this entire run of Kyle Shanahan's tenure. It has been largely like the offense garners a lot of discussion. We talk about quarterbacks a lot. The reason why the 49ers have been able to win at the high level that they have without their, quote unquote elite quarterback play until this year has been because the defense has been so good. So for the defense to come out and be as bad as it was in the previous 2 weeks would be, in my opinion, an all-time disappointment, and probably cause Steve Wilkes to lose his job, I would say, because this defense is simply too talented to get run over in the Super Bowl, right? Yeah. So, like, the tackling stuff, to me, like, I just kind of view this 49ers defense like these guys are just too talented. Like, this group has been together too long. These guys are too talented to just all of a sudden be like a crummy defense. Like, as shocking as it was, my opinion or my expectation is there's going to be a They're going to revert to the mean, revert to what we know in
Mhm.
terms of who they are. And like, I don't view the Chiefs as having the explosive playmakers like Jamison Williams and Jahmyr Gibbs and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Like, they have Travis Kelce, but he wins more with guile and savvy than he does explosiveness,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
And that's not to say the Chiefs don't have explosive guys, but I think the reason why the Niners were missing tackles against the Lions was just because of who those dudes were. Those are all young, super explosive players. And yeah,
Mhm.
Isaiah Pacheco is explosive for sure, but the Niners haven't really had any problem corralling running backs basically until Aaron Jones a few weeks ago in the Packers game, right? Like,
Yeah.
other than that, and you could make the case for Jahmyr Gibbs too. But just like this is just like suddenly like a recent problem. I'm not to say it's not a reason to be alarmed or worried about this game. It is for sure. But just with an extra week off, with everybody talking about it, with how talented and experienced this group is, I have a hard time believing that this is just going to be a defense that misses a ton of tackles and is like a serious liability now after 2 games.
No, that's fine. I get that. And honestly, that's probably right. Like that's I think the more measured take on it. I will say, regarding just tying this to what we were just talking about with Kyle Shanahan, one of my big things with Kyle Shanahan, because I worked in sports talk radio in the Bay Area, not to brag, and after 2020, it was like, should they fire Kyle Shanahan? He has a losing record as a coach. Only been to the playoffs once in 4 years. Should they fire Kyle? Go to the NFC title game. Oh, they fell short again. Do you fire Kyle? 2022. Oh, they fell short again. Do you fire Kyle Shanahan? Like, that's just always the thing. And one of my it's ridiculous regardless, but one of my big things that I always went back to was go watch 2017 and 2018. Those, and frankly, to a different extent, 2020. Those teams had every reason to just punt by week 9 and quit on the year.
Yeah.
And they never did. They played their asses off. They won a bunch of games they had no business winning in both seasons. Even Jimmy Garoppolo's 5-game stretch aside, you can go to 2018 when Garoppolo got hurt and they were playing hard down the stretch. They beat Seattle in the rain at Levi's Stadium. They almost beat Chicago, who was a playoff team that year. And it was like, dude, that's a team that buys in. Like, that is a team that is playing their asses off for their coach, and that matters above everything else for me. But if you come out
as someone who, go ahead.
But last thing, real quick. But if you come out, like Rob said, in the NFC title game, and you're like, yeah, you can throw our helmets on the field and go win this one, and the effort's not there. If that happens in the Super Bowl, that argument for me for Shanahan kind of goes out the window, because it's like, bro, if your mindset as a team is not there, then I don't know. I don't know what we're doing.
There's no other time for it to be there.
Yeah, I mean, as somebody who covered the team, I started covering the team in 2013 to see what they went through in 2014, 2015, and 2016. And then despite starting 0-9 in 2017, like, there was such a higher level of buy-in just from everybody involved in that 2017 team, despite the record being awful. Right? Like, so yeah, I agree with you. And I tend to think like we see it a lot in the NFL, and I don't know that it gets talked about enough. And maybe this is just purely anecdotal. And if I wanted to like go back and find like actual statistical or actual evidence that this exists, but I feel like when there's an area that can be improved, that is like a drastic problem in one game, particularly when it pertains to something like effort, like a controllable, to quote Kings coach Mike Brown, when it's a controllable that's an issue in a game, and it's all that gets talked about for 2 weeks, it's not an issue in the next game because it's just such a focus.
Yeah.
Right. And like for Chase Young in particular, because he's a guy who's obviously fairly been criticized a lot for the effort thing. Like, Chase Young's next contract could be entirely dependent on how he plays in the Super Bowl. Because right now, based on the NFC Championship game, it doesn't seem like he's going to get all that much money. But he's talented enough to where if the motor matches the talent, and say Chase Young has a sack and then another pressure that leads to an interception, or like holds up well against the run and makes a couple plays, like all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, maybe that's a guy who's getting $15-20 million a year from somebody next year. Yeah. But if he doesn't, and all we remember from Chase Young's time with the 49ers is him jogging in the NFC Championship game while the Lions are going down the field and scoring, then we'll be like, yeah, Chase Young might be a dude who's going to sign like a Samson Ebukam contract and not be somebody that is highly thought of going into free agency. So I just like the effort stuff, while as concerning as it was, I just have a hard time believing. And maybe look, this is in line with all my other points here. Maybe I'm just like way too rose-colored glasses on the 49ers and everything just sort of reverting back to what we know. But like, to me, this is like the thing, like, given all of the discussion about effort, I just have an impossible time, not impossible, but I have a really hard time being like, they're going to talk about effort all week and then like loaf in the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
That's hard for me to reconcile. And if it does happen, then it's like, man, Steve Wilkes gotta go.
I know this is anecdotal, but 21 of the 32 editors at the sites that I write for at the NFL Wire Network pick the Chiefs.
And I think it was like 88% of writers at The Athletic picked the Chiefs. And I think it was like, there was another, I think it was ESPN, and like 75% of their writers picked the Chiefs.
I've been listening to a ton of NFL podcasts, and I don't think I've heard a single person pick San Francisco. And I know this is anecdotal and it doesn't matter, and maybe everybody's picking the Chiefs because the Chiefs are just so obvious to win. But it feels like whenever there's a team that everybody's picking to win in a Super Bowl, it goes the other way. And the other thing that sticks out, and Chris, I'm saying all this to say that I don't think that this is necessarily like unfounded optimism by you. I think that you're giving the angle that not a lot of people are going to, because so much of the analysis is like, hey, the Chiefs have Patrick Mahomes, bro. I don't know what to tell you. Like, that's just it. But there's 21 other players on the field, and the 49ers are still pretty good. Also, the Chiefs +2 feels like a bait line from Vegas.
Yes,
when
I was going to make that point.
When every single person is like, oh, Chiefs +2, like that's how Vegas keeps the lights on.
They are begging. That line is begging people to bet on the Chiefs.
And people are betting on the Chiefs.
Yes.
At an insane rate from what I saw.
Yeah. So, and that's Vegas is like, great. You want the Chiefs -2 or Chiefs +2? Great. You want them +2.5? All right, here you go. Like, sure. Yeah. Anyways.
Yeah. So I keep going back to like, you know, the podcast where we had Aaron Schatz on talking about DVOA and the 49 shots, and where the 49ers were historically from a DVOA perspective. Like, they were historically good. And I know the Chiefs just beat the Ravens, who are also historically good from a DVOA perspective. But it's just like, I have a really hard time just throwing everything we thought throughout the regular season out the window when it comes to these two teams.
I think if you're going to acknowledge, keep going. My bad. Sorry.
Well, I just feel like it's, you know, the Niners playing poorly against the Packers, you know, like the human nature thing. You're a heavy favorite. You're at home. You can throw your helmet on the field. We're probably just going to walk over these dudes. There's probably an element of that with the Lions game too. And I'm not excusing it, but I just think, like, when we've seen this team play with a ton of urgency, when it was the Eagles, when it was the Cowboys, the Niners came in and kicked those teams' asses. Like, it wasn't even close. Blew them off the field. And I'm not saying that the Niners are going to do that to the Chiefs. I just have a hard time believing that, because, you know, they had a couple poor performances in games that everyone expected them to win. Now that they're actually underdogs,
they did win too,
which they did win in ways that, like, they had been criticized for not winning before. That, like, now that they're an underdog, it's like, oh, they're just, you know, they're going to get run through in the same way the Lions ran through them. It's like, man, I still remember this team that was dominant throughout the regular season, that was, you know, historically good from a DVOA perspective. Like, I don't have reason to believe that is not within them. And the fact that they have the emotional edge of playing the team that they lost to the Super Bowl 4 years ago, and, you know, this core having lost in so many heartbreaking like the Chiefs won the Super Bowl last year. So, like, for the majority of these guys, it's the feeling for them is drastically different going into this game than it is for the 49ers, who might never get there again. And the majority of the Chiefs players just won it last year. And it's like, yeah, we experienced it. You know, there's that's just why it's so hard to repeat. That's why you don't see repeat champions in the NFL all that much.
Yeah.
And the thing
really,
that I struggle
really
with, and I think I go back and forth with myself on the fact that what do you punish or praise a team more for? Playing like shit in the second half, or playing historically good first half, or playing historically good in the second half and winning the game? You know, and kind of proving to yourself and the rest of the world, because everybody loved to say that freaking stat over and over of Kyle Shanahan trailing by this many points in the fourth quarter. They just never mentioned the fact that NFL teams trailing by that much in the fourth quarter are like 10 and 1,000. You know, like,
yeah. Shout out to the
let's just-
Sandwich Man for putting those out. Mike Sando, the Athletic.
Like, it's so with me, I'm just like, okay, to me, it might be more valuable the fact that they did win the game. That they, like I said earlier, I think I'm talking, and even I'm guilty of it. I'm talking about the Lions game as if they lost in some way, you know, but they didn't. They won, and they won it in a way that no one has ever won a game in a championship game before. And I think that maybe going into the Super Bowl and knowing that really there, for the most part, any realistic lead that Patrick Mahomes is going to build, short of it being an absolute blowout, the 49ers are going to know that they can come back from it. And that's a super valuable thing, just coming from a middle school coach's perspective. I can't even imagine how much more valuable it becomes as they grow up. But like, you just, the attribute of, it doesn't really matter what the score is, and getting somebody to continue to play with like their hair on fire, as they say, is one of the absolute hardest things to find in all of football. You know, we're human. When a game's not going your way, you tend to shut down and kind of turtle up. And for the 49ers to handle that and go into come out of halftime with a 17-point deficit and still do what it takes to win the game is maybe something that I'm not giving them enough praise for, because that's just not common at all. And it's more along the lines of being special. So maybe that gives them an additional edge against the Chiefs, knowing that it doesn't really matter how much they're down by.
Had the 49ers won 34-3 against the Lions, we would feel a lot better about them. And the discussion leading into this game would be, man, the Niners were really dominant. They played at a really high level. But let me ask you guys, like, what prepares the 49ers better for playing Patrick Mahomes on Sunday? Having to come from behind against the Lions and prove that they actually could come from behind, or rolling over the Lions and winning by 30 points?
Facing him in 2019. No. No,
I just think they're better off having gone through what they went through against the Packers and Lions than having just steamrolled through those teams, because the Niners steamrolled through the Vikings and Packers in the playoffs in 2019, and it didn't serve them all that well in the Super Bowl.
Steamrolled.
Yeah, I think it definitely creates more of a sense of urgency, especially because I'm guessing like human nature sets in, right? No matter what a player says, no matter what your mindset is as an athlete, Tavarius Moore picks off Patrick Mahomes in the fourth quarter, and it's like, that's ball game. I know that's what we were saying at my Super Bowl party. It's like, oh, that's it. You run down 4 or 5 minutes here, you kick a field goal, night, like game over. And then we saw how sideways that game got. But I think walking down a 17-point lead in a quarter of football is, just to your point, Chris, I think that's super valuable, because now there's a belief just in that process, where even if you're up 10 in the fourth quarter and the Chiefs score a touchdown to go up 3, it's like, okay, you know how to climb back into this game. You know how to retake that lead. You know how to burn clock. And I think being in that spot for Kyle Shanahan and for the 49ers, and Rob, you brought this up earlier, and I thought it was a great point. Or it might have been Chris. I forget which one of you. One of you guys brought this up, and I thought it was a great point. So good that I remember who said it.
One of you guys in the hats.
One of you guys who look vaguely similar at a quick glance.
We all have beards. I need glasses.
No, but the whole 9 rushes to 11 passes, and now that I say that out loud, Rob said that. The 9 rushes to 11 passes in that third quarter. Like, that's something that I don't think Kyle Shanahan in 2019 does the same way in that same spot. Right. I think it's spread it out, and it's Garoppolo throw, and try and get back into this thing. And I think that leaning on their run game the way they did, where now, even if they fall behind against Kansas City, even if Kansas City scores first, I feel way better about them in that game than I would have had, frankly, they steamrolled Green Bay and Detroit.
Well, I think one thing we need to acknowledge too is if I'm going to talk about how the 49ers got lucky when it came to the Lions decisions in that game that kind of enabled the 49ers to do what they did.
Mhm.
If you go and look at how they beat Baltimore, I don't know where you guys stand on it, but the quote unquote worst rule in sports, Baltimore was about to score a touchdown. And he reached the ball across the goal line and he fumbled. That's then you had the fact that the Ravens completely I can't even understand why, completely abandoned the run game. Like Lamar Jackson led the team with 6 carries.
Insane. It was like 6 designed carries for running backs.
Right. And Edwards had 3. And that was, he was their leading running back, 3 carries. So the Ravens did the Chiefs just as many favors as the Lions did the 49ers. And even if you go back and if you want to open it up a little bit, you go into the Chiefs schedule and look at how they closed up the season. There's not a whole lot to hang their hat on. They lost to the Raiders. They had like a back and forth game against the Patriots. They lost to the Bills. They lost pretty convincingly to the Packers. They lost to the Eagles at home, and that was after a bye week. And they lost to the Broncos. They barely beat the Dolphins. You know what I mean? So if you're looking for ways in which the 49ers or this game may be more competitive than we think it's going to be, you have to, and if you're going to, like Chris has been saying, if you're going to take into account the bigger picture and how they were 2 teams in the regular season, not just in the 2-game sample size of the playoffs, you could make a case that the Chiefs are pretty fortunate to be here. And so are the 49ers, and that's fair. That's just how football works. There's a lot of luck involved, but it's not to say that the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes have just steamrolled everybody on their way here and the 49ers are just next in line.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Can I run my wrinkles by you guys real quick?
We love some wrinkles.
It's just an odd turn of phrase. Run your wrinkles.
I just want to run my wrinkles right past you guys. So that's weird. All right.
We are getting old.
Chris, this is one that you and I talked about on the last episode of Candlestick Chronicles, but I would like to talk about it here with Rob, of course, the Candlestick Chronicles Striking Gold crossover episode. Rob, what do you think about the idea of Eric Armstead playing edge in this game?
I would do it. I would 100% do it because I think the Chiefs are a bit more dependent on they're much more of a power running type of scheme, and I think that based on their deficiencies along the interior of their offensive line, and even if I think it was Joe Thuney, he's injured, might play. They haven't said yet.
He's out.
Sounds like he's not going to play.
Yeah. And I know that's kind of bounced around. And after seeing the Lions game, maybe the Chiefs are going to try and switch things up and run to the outsides of the 49ers defense, which people have done to pretty high effect. So, and I can't remember what it was during the season. I can't remember what game it was, but I was like, why don't the 49ers just mess around with it a little bit and put Hargrave and Armstead on the edges and put Bosa and Young in the interior just to see what happens. And then they did it in the game, and I just felt like the smartest man alive, and it worked. I think they got a sack on the play or something, and so it made me feel real special.
Chris Kasurik's a big striking gold guy. So.
Yeah, exactly.
That tracks.
If Chris Kasurik's a big striking gold guy, then he probably wouldn't have appreciated a lot of things I said about how much money the 49ers defensive line is making and how little they've produced as of late. But I think that something like that, and it's not like you're hanging a guy out to dry. Eric Armstead's played a lot of edge, and he's much better as an interior guy. But if you put him out there, it's not like he doesn't know what he's doing because he spent so much time out there in the past when they had Buckner. So I think that's something you're going to see them do a bit more in this game. Just to, it seems so silly to say, put it all on Patrick Mahomes' shoulders, because I'm not exactly sure that's what you want to happen, but that wouldn't surprise me at all.
I also think it's probably more palatable to put Eric Armstead on the edge if Thuney's not playing and you have a backup at left guard, because then you're like, all right, Javon Kinlaw can probably handle a backup NFL guard, right? Or at least you'd feel better about Kinlaw going up against a backup guard than somebody as good as Joe Thuney.
Sure.
So I don't know.
Has Kinlaw been? I haven't paid enough attention. Like it seems like his arrow's trending up a bit in terms of how he's played recently.
He's been fine. He's been better. He's been, put it this way, he's been better than the NFC Championship game last year, but
Right.
that's an extremely low bar.
Yeah.
Very low bar.
Run some more wrinkles, Kyle.
Yeah.
All right, I've got a couple more wrinkles for you guys. Chris is another one we talked about last time, and this is one I feel very strongly about. I really think that this is something we're going to see. Christian McCaffrey and Elijah Mitchell on the field together.
Why not? Like
I've been wondering it all year, and if you're not going to do it now, I don't know when you're going to do it.
One of the things I said to KP was it wouldn't surprise me if this game looks like Christian McCaffrey hits at least 20 carries, Elijah Mitchell hits at least 5, Deebo Samuel, it's a good, there we go. Deebo Samuel gets, at least 5. You know what I mean? It just seems like if the 49ers are really going to commit to running the ball, it's probably going to involve not solely Christian McCaffrey. I get that Kyle Shanahan thinks it's like a sin to take him off the field, but at least if Elijah Mitchell's on the field at the same time, he's still there. He's Christian McCaffrey's still on the field.
Deebo Samuel was his nickname in 2011.
You meant
what that reminds me of?
You meant 2020, but that's fine.
You know what that DJ Bossman Fat?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. He got released recently, right?
Yeah, he did. He stinks. I can't remember his name. Homie
Cornerback from the Cowboy, Kelvin Joseph.
Kelvin Joseph, that's it.
Right?
That sounds right.
Yeah.
DJ Bossman Fat.
It's just a name so bad that it just sticks with you.
All right, here's another one.
Honestly, I would be surprised. I would be surprised if we see Elijah Mitchell and CMC on the field at once.
Dang. That
Sorry.
to me feels like no, you're a hater. It's fine. That to me feels like the kind of thing that you could really mess with the defense's rules like that, which is Kyle Shanahan's whole thing. I mean, you could even get weird. I'm not saying for 40 snaps or anything like that, but we saw Tavarius Moore for what, like 7 snaps in the Super Bowl in 2019 or something. Like, it just needs to be a couple of plays here and there, maybe a key third down, where you have a defense scrambling a little bit, and then you're getting the ball into one of your playmakers' hands while they're trying to figure out who has what responsibility.
Well, if you're going to get 2 weeks to prepare for a game, you'd think that both teams are going to come at the other with some plays that we've never seen them run before. So I'm gonna say it's going to be that one.
My man, thanks.
I'll take the under.
Rob, I'll throw this question at you since Chris hates all my ideas. Okay, I have a question.
It's a wrinkle.
In Brandon Ayuk's rookie year, he had 16 targets behind the line of scrimmage. 16 of them things. He had 11 in 2021. He had 6 last year. How many do you think he had this year?
Oh man, like a trivia question. 2.
Chris?
I think 0.
0.
That was my first thought, but I was like, there's no way that could be correct.
0 passes to Brandon Ayuk behind the line of scrimmage. He is a super explosive athlete. The Chiefs are going to blitz like crazy. I don't know how successful the Niners are going to be throwing the ball down the field, especially if L'Jarius Sneed is on Brandon Ayuk. That's a tough matchup. You need to get the ball in his hands. I think that this is the game where if you have a Brandon Ayuk tunnel screen or something like that, I think you got to run it.
I like that.
I don't.
Thanks.
That.
Yes.
I don't mind Brandon Ayuk in man coverage against L'Jarius Sneed at all, though. Like, I think that Brandon Ayuk's route running. I'm not sure there's a corner in the NFL that can cover Brandon Ayuk, and I have a higher opinion of him. But what's interesting,
no, I think you're right.
Is you say like the 0 targets at the line of scrimmage thing, because I spent some of the season trying to define like just how important Brandon Ayuk was to this offense as the question kept coming up, like, do they re-sign him? Do they give him big money? And I was like, I feel like George Kittle and Christian McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel have like the -5 to 10 yard range completely locked down. They'll make every play you want in that range. And then I've just basically said everything beyond that is Brandon Ayuk. So that was kind of my way of defining his importance in the offense, is just every intermediate and deep throw is pretty much him. And
well,
I'm not sure the offense is prepared to lose that.
So if you're Steve Spagnuolo and you're, he blitzes a lot of corners, right? Like he
Mhm.
blitzes corners at some of the highest rates in the league.
Right.
If you're doing that, you're probably not blitzing the corner on Deebo Samuel's side, given how good he is with the ball in his hands, right? So
Mhm.
you're probably blitzing the corner on Brandon Ayuk's side. And if you blitz the corner on that side, that might be where you can gash the Chiefs with a bubble screen
Mhm.
or a tunnel screen.
Yep.
And so maybe that's I think that's a very keen observation, Kyle.
Thanks.
I think you're onto something with that one. I like that one way better than the Elijah Mitchell and CMC getting.
Oh yeah,
sacks
no,
the
that's
other time.
clear. That's clear to me.
I mean, I just didn't see the why not entertain the idea.
I'm less committed on this one, but I was trying to find the extra defensive back wrinkle, and the only thing I could land on was some Isaiah Oliver as like a in the box safety / linebacker who you feel okay with him matched up on Travis Kelce. You don't hate it, but he can step up and run support. That was the only other thing, but I'm not committed to that.
I don't disagree, but I would say Logan Ryan has a better chance of being that guy than Isaiah Oliver. IMO.
Okay, I'll take your wrinkle and add a wrinkle on top of it, so you have multiple wrinkles. Who on the in the 49ers
we need some Botox on this pod.
Who
Super Bowl wrinkles brought to you by Botox.
who on the 49ers defense do you feel comfortable being matched up with Travis Kelce? Because I was watching, it was Kay Adams interviewing Luke Kuechly, and he said the reason Travis Kelce beats defenses so frequently is he's never given like a specific route. He's kind of given like an area of the field, and it's up to him how he gets there. And him and Patrick Mahomes are on such a good page with each other that it just works. And he said that the reason they're usually pretty good against zone defenses because you're not supposed to have your eyes on any one offensive player. You're supposed to kind of just be in your zone, and you end up looking at the quarterback a lot more. And he says that's all Travis Kelce needs is for you to look at the quarterback for a half second, and he finds that soft spot, and the ball's already on the way. And so I'm assuming if the 49ers really want to take away Travis Kelce, if that's one of their top two things they need to do, maybe they match up with him man on man, even if the rest of the defense is playing zone. It wouldn't surprise me if they stuck someone man to man with Travis Kelce, but who would you feel comfortable doing that?
Fred Warner and Mooney Ward. That's it for me.
I was at Mooney Ward. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think Mooney Ward could cover Kelce. He's big and long enough. And
I think that, and you probably wouldn't want Fred Warner doing it on too consistent of a basis, just given how much he does for the center of the defense. I'm assuming you wouldn't want to just have him bump out and cover. I mean, that might be what they do, and obviously it's never going to be any one thing. But me and KP talked about Diamador Lenore. He's small, but he's like about that action. We've seen him
a dog
throw haymakers. He's got that animal in him. So I couldn't bring myself to say it. I couldn't.
He's got that canine inside,
right? So it's, maybe that's the question is if they truly want somebody matched up on Kelce on every single play, which is what the Ravens obviously wanted to do. They just weren't counting on an insanely good throw from Kyle Hamilton. Had good coverage on that play, and the throw was just perfect. So,
I think the Kelce thing is particularly worrisome because of how often the Niners play zone.
Right.
Steve Wilkes gonna have to get away from that.
Probably, but also, you're playing man. Like playing man against Patrick Mahomes is also begging the opportunity to have him scramble on you. So you kind of, it's pick your poison, guys.
You know what? It sure is.
I choose no poison.
This podcast is going on an hour and a half. Do we want to do some prize picks, get some predictions, and get out of here?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Check out Prize Picks, prizepicks.com/candlestick, promo code candlestick. Rob, do you also have a site and promo code?
I do. prizepicks.com/gold. I already messed up. Gold, as in, anyways. And the promo code is also gold.
Okay, great.
So, yeah.
That's for a first deposit match up to $100. Go to prizepicks.com/candlestick, promo code candlestick for a first deposit match up to $100. You can also do prizepicks.com/gold, promo code gold for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks is the very best. It is daily fantasy sports made easy. You pick 2 to 6 players, you pick more or less on their stat projections, and then you watch the winnings pile up. Or that's if you're fading our entries. It sounds like if you're following our entries, you're probably watching the L's stack up, and that's okay. The goal is fun, and that's what Prize Picks is for me. I tie in basketball stuff. They've got like golf. They have tennis. I mean, almost any sport that you can lay eyes on, they've got projections, and you can create a daily fantasy entry with it. And it is a ton of fun. It's just you and the projections, no sharps, not 1,000 people that you're playing against. It's just you and your entry. It is a really, really fun way to consume sports. It has enhanced my sports watching experience. Shout out to Prize Picks. Rob, you go ahead and go first, man.
Okay. I'm assuming I'm going to get this one out of the way, and we're all going to have it. The Patrick Mahomes more than 1/2 a yard throwing. I think we're all going to have that one.
I'm going less. No,
I don't even. Is that even a button you can click?
Yeah, the special right now for the Super Bowl, Patrick Mahomes' projection is 1/2 a passing yard.
Right. So if he throws for 1 yard, you've already done something good. You already get to stare at like a green bar the whole time, and then be even more depressed when no other green bars show up on your projections. But I also went when it came to the Chiefs. I also went Harrison Butker more than 1.5 field goals made. That seemed pretty easy. He's a good kicker, and I'm assuming the Chiefs aren't going to score just touchdowns. That would be a problem. I also went Christian McCaffrey. I went with a little demon play on this one. More than 1.5 rushing and receiving touchdowns. So maybe that's kind of like what my entire entry hinges upon. But I think if the 49ers win the game, Christian McCaffrey's probably going to score more than once in that effort.
Agreed.
And then the last entry I put in here was, and this is a tough one, but I went with Brock Purdy, less than 248.5 passing yards. Just kind of sticking with my idea that if the 49ers are going to win, it's going to be behind a dominant rushing display. And the Chiefs have been very, very good against the pass.
Yeah. I love the entry.
I went with a four-man power play.
I love the entry.
Appreciate it.
Chris?
Or excuse me, I should have hit you with a thanks.
You're welcome.
Am I up now?
Yeah, you're up.
Okay. I'm going. Look, it hurt every ounce of me to do this, to go with a flex play. If you've been following along all year, you know how much I'm not. But
You were forced into it by the requirements of the site.
It's a little bit different. Like we're making some monetary decisions here. I'm not going to get too deep into it, but we are going flex play. I'm not proud. If I could just do a power play and feel good about it, and then I would. But I've taken L's all season, so I'm going flex play just to kind of mix things up a little bit here. So it's a flex play. I got 6 entries, including the Mahomes more than 1/2 a yard. It's obvious. George Kittle. I'm going more than 50.5 receiving yards. I think with, the point about the 49ers running the ball a lot, utilizing play action, taking advantage of the Chiefs' weakness on defense, I think that involves a lot of George Kittle in the passing game. So that's that play for me. I'm going more than 12.5 rushing yards for Brock Purdy. He probably gets that on one run. So I do think, like we talked about earlier in the pod, the idea that Purdy has maybe unlocked a different level to his game with his ability to scramble in key situations in the second half of the Lions game. I think that could come through here. So I'm feeling good about more than 12.5 rushing yards for Brock. Rashee Rice, I'm going fewer than 67.5 receiving yards. I just think that, I don't think it's going to be a super prolific Patrick Mahomes passing game. He's average Mahomes. Speaking of, I had it up. He's He averaged 6.4 yards per attempt against the Dolphins. Obviously, that was in like negative 75 degrees in Kansas City. I understand that. And he averaged 6.2 yards per attempt against Baltimore. Obviously, a cold atmosphere there too. He had 9.3 in yards per attempt in Buffalo and in a high scoring game. The point here, though, is I think it's more likely we're going to get like a 250 yard performance from Patrick Mahomes. And if that's the case, I don't think Rashee Rice is going to go for more than 67.5. So I'm going under there. This one's for Kyle.
Thanks.
Sorry, fewer yards. This one's for Kyle. Harrison Butker and Jake Moody, more than half of a field goal attempt longer than 48 yards. So one of them has to hit a field goal longer than 48 yards.
I like
that is my
so
sixth
much.
entry.
They just have to attempt one?
No, they have to make it. They have to make
somebody. That was what broke.
Somebody in the game, one of the kickers has to make a.
I know who I think is going to do
it. That one's kind of for entertainment purposes.
I know. I love.
You feel
that.
better
That's
about
great.
a flex play when you're going with Jake Moody potentially making something longer than 48 yards. But
well, and
we haven't talked about Jake Moody, but yeah, that's fine.
We're about to.
Okay.
But let's keep it a stack. You put field goal kickers in your prize picks entries so the field goals are more interesting. If the field goal is not affecting your squares or whatever you got going on at your big game shindig, the field goals, you got to put them in your prize picks entry so that way they matter. All right, so I'm going the Mahomes, more than half a passing yard. I'm going Isaiah Pacheco, more than 68.5 rushing yards. I think that's something the Chiefs are going to really commit to. I could see it going the way Aaron Jones did, where he's just kind of okay and then has one big run that gets him clear of the 68.5 rushing yard number. I'm going Deebo Samuel, less than 5 receptions, because I think he can have a big day on a smaller number of catches than that. If this was touches, I would go more on touches, but it wouldn't shock me if he goes like 4 catches and then 4 or 5 carries and racks up some yards that way. So I'm going to go less on the receptions.
I would hate to see him get a couple pop passes. That
he's getting at least one, dog. He's getting at least one for sure. Christian McCaffrey, I'm going to go less than 90.5 rushing yards. The Niners are going to commit to running, but I also think you're going to see the Chiefs really commit to stopping the run. And only 2 players have gone more than that number against Kansas City all year, and they both play for the Raiders, who see the Chiefs all the time. So I'm going to go less on that number because 91 rushing yards feels really high. And I think McCaffrey can affect games as a pass catcher enough that he won't necessarily need rushing yards. So I'm going to go less on that. Harrison Butker, I'm going to go more than 1.5 made field goals. And Jake Moody, I'm going to go less than 1.5 made field goals because he's going to try to. He is missing that first one and then, probably drilling the second one. So
he's going to have like a 43-yarder in like late in the first quarter, and he's going to push that thing right for sure.
They're going to go their first drive. They're going to have 4th and 6 at Kansas City's. What did we decide last time? 32. So it's a 49-yarder from there. And
well, he's going to drill that one, but if it's 42 yards.
Okay, so 4th and 6 at the Chiefs 25, and they're going to roll the field goal team out, and everybody who watches this team is going to be like, they should be going for it. You have Christian McCaffrey, you have Deebo Samuel, why are you not going for it? And then he's going to push that shit wide right, and everybody's going to be like, oh man, Jake Moody. And people who follow the 49ers are going to be like, yep, that's how it goes. And then he's going to step into a 52-yarder in the 4th quarter and drill it like he does it every day.
Yeah, if anything, the 49ers just trying to get that shit out of the way so that he'll make all the rest of them.
Just long kick return, first down, kick it. It's like a turn.
What if the Niners win? What if the Niners win on a Jake Moody walk-off?
I knew it was coming. Coming.
It would be the greatest mea culpa in the history of podcasts. I would come on here and dance in my wrongness.
feel like if that situation happened, the Chiefs defense would just stand there and watch him kick, being confident that it's not going through the uprights. They're like,
No, but that like yeah, I don't know. He's been outside. It's uncanny. Misses first kick, nails the rest of the way. I don't get it. So
didn't he make a 50-something yarder in the playoffs? Wasn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't get it. But yeah, if his one made field goal is the game winner, then great. I'm pulling for the guy.
It would be so funny.
would
Like
love
Jake
that for
Moody
him.
has like this tough preseason, his first year in the league, misses a couple kicks, doesn't have a whole lot of confidence going in, cost the 49ers a game in Cleveland, misses a couple kicks in the playoffs, nails a game-winning Super Bowl, and just goes on to have Adam Vinatieri's career. That would be wild.
Oh,
Just walks off
that'd be
the
so
field.
funny.
He would walk off the field with zero emotion on his face. His facial expression would not change. He would just walk off the field.
You know what sucks for me on that is I would have to eat so much shit on the 99th pick being a kicker. Because at that point, like if you win a Super Bowl with that kicker, you've done it. Nothing else
Right,
matters at that point.
He could get cut next summer and it wouldn't matter. It would be a great pick.
Right. Yeah. It won you a Super Bowl ostensibly. So yeah, I would have to eat a lot of crow, as to not belabor the SH word. If that happens, and I would be the first one to
wouldn't be the
tap
only
chest
one
on me. I was wrong on it. So, all right, that's prize picks.
Predictions. Oh, sorry.
What? No, I wasn't. No, I just no.
spoke
it was
over
fine.
you.
No, you didn't. I'm still look. This sucks. I've been taking the Chiefs all week. And the more we talk,
one of us has to take the Chiefs. So like, don't feel terrible.
I'll do it. All right, I'll lay on that grenade.
Okay.
Let me say this.
Okay.
I'm sticking because I hate, dude. So we had this guy at 95.7 during the Super Bowl lead up. He was on during the bye week and then on the next week, and he had two different predictions. And I get that your mind changes and stuff, but that just kind of annoyed me. Like, wait, what? So now you're just got all your bases covered. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say this. My optimism about the 49ers winning has grown dramatically over the last 24 or so hours. I see way more paths now than I did. Partly because a lot of the stuff that you guys brought up today. But I don't want to be, well, that's weird. I don't want to be a flip-flopper. And I'm going to stick with my prediction. I've been riding Chiefs 30-23. That's kind of what I've been going with. So that's what I'm going to go with on the podcast. And if I'm wrong, like I said, I will be the first one to bask in my wrongness. Rob?
Okay.
Well, I mean, I told KP the same thing. My prediction through most of this was 31-21 Chiefs. But I mean, I guess this is the ultimate, like, either side of the fence thing, like saying what I thought up until this point. But between last night's pod, this night's pod, just taking a closer look at the game and kind of not allowing the Lions game, or at least that Lions first half, to scar me any more than it already did. Just from a football perspective, like, it's seriously, I'd never seen a defense play that bad. Like, so it was pretty jarring, but they turned it around. I'm going to go Harrison Butker has to make 2 field goals so my prize picks can hit. So I'm going to go 20, 27, 20 49ers. 27-20 49ers.
Okay. I think it's going to be close throughout. And then I think the Niners are going to pull away late. I'm going to go 34-20, and it's going to look far more like they're going to be, there's going to be a Deebo Samuel catch and run 60-yard touchdown. There's going to be like a Christian McCaffrey short yardage touchdown. And then, I think Christian McCaffrey is ultimately going to win MVP because he scores 2 or 3 times. And I just, like, for as much talk as Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce are getting, I think Christian McCaffrey is the best player in the game. And I think you could make a case that Deebo Samuel could also potentially be that. And I also think George Kittle could get a touchdown. I just think that, my opinion, which I've made pretty clear on this pod, is that we're overvaluing the small sample size of what the playoffs have been to this point. And I think we're more likely to see both teams revert to a version of what they were in the regular season, which includes the Niners looking like a more dominant team than they were against Detroit and against Green Bay. And I think it's going to be a heavy Christian McCaffrey game. And I think this is ultimately going to be a game where we realize, like, man, Christian McCaffrey is probably a Hall of Famer, and we should probably talk about him with a little bit more respect and realize that trade for him last year was arguably the best midseason trade in NFL history. That's kind of my opinion here. So I think it's going to be one of those games where it's like 24-20 going into the fourth quarter, and then the Niners kind of pull away late, and then the score ends up being more lopsided than the game actually was. I think it's going to be close. I think it's going to be entertaining, but ultimately, I just think this Niners offense is too good. That's like really all it comes down to. I think the Niners offense is too good. They have too many answers. Kyle Shanahan at some point in his career is going to paint his masterpiece. And I don't know if he's ever going to have a full complement of players like this one, because at some point the Niners are going to have to pay Brock Purdy, and they're not going to have an elite tight end and 2 elite receivers and a Hall of Fame level running back and a Hall of Fame level left tackle. Like, this is probably the most talented group the 49ers are ever going to have under Kyle Shanahan offensively. So I think this is the time to do it. And I think it's going to look like, oh yeah, this is the mastermind painting his masterpiece.
Yeah.
And we finally saw it, and the 49ers are over the hump, and it means a whole lot more to them given what they've gone through the last 5 years in comparison to the Chiefs, who, not saying they're fat and happy, but just aren't going to have the same emotional edge after winning the Super Bowl last year.
I'm already annoyed at all the pregame prognostication, again, including myself, that has been like, oh, the Chiefs are going to win. They have Patrick Mahomes. And I'm already annoyed that if the 49ers win, those exact same people are going to be like, well, of course the Niners won. They were the best team all year. They had the best roster in football. How did we not see this?
That's
in your defense, though,
kind of what I'm coming back to.
Right.
Did you guys see the culmination of Patrick Mahomes' playoff statistics?
No.
He's played in 17 playoff games now. So a regular
he's
season.
at like 4,000 yards and like 27 touchdowns and 3 picks.
It would be, if they took just his postseason stats, it would be like an all-time quarterback season. All right. So 67.5 completion percentage, 4,800 passing yards, 450 rushing yards, 39 passing touchdowns, 5 rushing touchdowns to only 7 interceptions in the postseason against the good teams. So, like, I understand. At least
God.
Like, that's like an all-time great season just from postseason statistics.
No, you're right.
It's not to say that the 49ers.
I feel great about my Chiefs pick again. Thanks, Rob.
No, exactly. So, like, you're not. There is a little bit of it's Patrick Mahomes, especially in the playoffs, because that shit right there is bonkers. Like, that's not normal. So
absolutely, and I don't disagree with any of that, and I would not disagree with anybody who went into the game being like, I'm picking Patrick Mahomes. Like, that is completely fine analysis. I'm just going the other way. I just think that a lot of times what we think should happen in Super Bowls does not. Yeah,
no doubt. All right, subscribe to Striking Gold wherever you get your podcast. Subscribe to Candlestick Chronicles wherever you get your podcasts. We would appreciate that greatly. We love Rob dearly, and Rob, I don't want to speak for you, but I appreciate that there are different voices on the 49ers doing content here at Blue Wire, different thoughts, different opinions. So make sure to check out both the pods, and we'll be with you throughout the offseason, hanging out, talking ball. And Rob, let's do these crossover episodes more often.
I agree. I didn't want to feel, you kind of end up feeling like a third wheel bumping into something that's already great. I only listen to maybe 2 or 3 podcasts, and your guys is one of them. So,
thanks.
but it's any excuse I can to get on here. I'll take it.
All right.
Kyle said different voices. Kyle said different voices, and I'll be like, different voices, similar looks.
I'll get some glasses. I'll get some glasses.
Perfect. Here we go. All right. Thanks everybody for watching. Thanks everybody for listening. We will talk to you after the game. The Super Bowl, I mean.
Everybody enjoy.
Don't drink and drive.